What are the most important tools and resources that librarians use in supporting academic research?
We're using a lot of databases and discovery tools, and some of them are free and some of them are not. We're also using a lot of reference management tools. And so that can be really challenging, especially for librarians, because we're providing citations to our researchers. Every single researcher is using a different reference management tool. And I'm, for anyone paying for resources that they would like, but it's really hard to support that.
Welcome to Insights Exchange, the crossroads of ideas and academia. I'm your host, Nikesh Gosalia. According to a recent ResearchGate report on collaboration in science and technology, nearly 75% of researchers believe that interdisciplinary collaboration has led to breakthroughs in their field. In fact, these collaborations are becoming essential to tackle complex scientific challenges. This evolving landscape is reshaping the role of support systems like academic libraries and technology, especially in clinical research settings. I'm delighted to introduce today's guest, Alyssa Grimshaw, a seasoned research and education librarian at the Yale School of Medicine. With deep expertise in clinical research support and a passion for fostering meaningful collaborations, Alyssa has been instrumental in advancing the role of libraries in academic and clinical settings. She brings a wealth of knowledge on how librarians can facilitate impactful research, drive innovation, and enhance communication among researchers. Her unique insights into the evolving landscape of research and publishing makes her the perfect guest for today's conversation. Welcome, Alyssa.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Okay, let's get started. So, from your experience, what are some key factors that make a research collaboration successful?
Yeah, so I think most importantly is clear communication, especially when people working together have different goals, different reporting line structures. Establishing open lines of communication among team members from the start is really critical. It's also really important to define the roles and responsibilities when entering a project with each other, ensuring all participants understand their specific contributions and responsibilities within a project definitely helps make this transition between different project milestones really a lot smoother. And it's also important that you share goals, right? So making sure that everyone's on board with the structure and all of that great information. Mutual respect is also key. So understanding what the other person brings to the table with their expertise and how that will impact the project. And then a supportive infrastructure. I know where I work, one of the hardest challenges is there's everyone that wants to collaborate, but everyone has all these competing goals and projects and everything else. And then finding people to work together, even amongst one institution, can be really difficult because everyone's so siloed. And so you may really want to work with another researcher, but it can be difficult to connect. And that's just in one institution. So when you're thinking about multi-institutional collaboration too, that is even a bigger problem, which is, I'm going to make a key in for librarians here. Librarians talk to a lot of different people. So we can see patterns between our researchers pretty frequently and even our clinicians. And then we can connect them with other clinicians doing work that can be really supportive in helping them push their project forward. And also collaborating to learn different things about the project. So you're not going in from zero. You can have someone that's already gone through all of the tried and true problems and challenges, and you can have that conversation early, which can be really nice.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Alyssa. And talking about challenges, from your perspective, how do you approach the challenges that might arise due to the interdisciplinary collaborations?
Yeah. So again, I think communication here is really key. Communicating and addressing differences, whether that's in terminology, expectations, or methodologies early on is really important just to make sure everyone's on the same page. I also think it's really important to be adaptable, being open to the evolving project goals. You might start with one goal and realize, oh, this was really great, but there's something different or bigger or more impactful here that we want to do. So just being able to change and pivot, and then creating common ground by sharing priorities and research questions that align across multiple disciplines. So I really love when I can take a project that is of interest to my researchers and then put a librarian spin on it and then present it at my conference too. Then, we're putting a lot more effort in looking at things in different scopes, which can be really helpful.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And maybe I should have asked this before, Alyssa, but clearly seeing that how passionate you are about what you do, what's the background in terms of your journey? How did you go on to take on this role? Yeah, what was kind of, if you could share that, it'll benefit the listeners quite a bit.
Yeah, so I actually wanted to be an archivist or a curator when I first started in school. But when I graduated from undergrad, the state had a spending freeze, so there was no positions open. And so I actually applied just randomly to a medical library as their weekend person. I really fell in love because the data is so much better indexed than a lot of the other disciplines, which, you have to get used to every discipline. And I do a lot of questions that overlap with, psych or history or divinity. There's all scope of research happening. But yeah, so I just fell in love. And then, one thing led to another, and one position led to another position in a hospital. And then I transitioned to academic medical research, on the clinical side though. So
fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. Talking about the role of librarians, how do you see that particular role evolving in facilitating research collaborations, especially in a clinical setting? And there's a part B to the question, which is, could you discuss the role of technology in enhancing communication and collaboration among researchers, particularly in a post-pandemic world?
Yeah, so I think a big part of what librarians are doing and will continue to do is knowledge integration. So we're uniquely positioned to synthesize diverse resources and evidence to support research and clinical teams. And so we're helping some institutions. I mean, I can't talk for all institutions, but we negotiate the contracts to ensure that our clinicians and our researchers have access to the materials they need to make the medical decision. So it's really important that as part of our role in librarianship is that we're staying ahead of the technology and understanding the new stuff that's out there and looking in the future to see what research tools our clinicians and researchers need, and clinical tools, obviously point of care. So I think that is really, really important part of our role, but it really depends on, and even in medical librarianship, it's so different and it depends on the position. So I know I do a lot of systematic reviews and part of my job, and then I do a lot of clinical work in the other part. I think it's a lot of knowing your population and what information that they need and they use. So with my systematic review teams, obviously we need more databases that have the most information that's really up to date. And we're thinking about automated tools that can help with the process and to make this easier, because there's such a burden on systematic review research and the work that's being done. They're being published so much more frequently. So, everyone's trying to get them done faster and faster. And we're not there yet. I'm hopeful that we will be. But I think that librarians are really good at knowing what technology is out there and helping our researchers connect the technology to be able to do their work a little faster. And I also think that on the other side, the clinician side, it's a lot of point of care tools, and especially in America, our patients are becoming significantly more complex. So it's not as easy as the patient with diabetes, what drug do they get? Because this patient with diabetes most likely has 15 other comorbidities, and the doctors are trying to manage all of those, and those can be really difficult. So it's also that knowledge integration, making sure they have the appropriate point of care tools, helping them, with things about drug interactions is also really important in the clinical setting. But a lot of what work we're doing in the clinical setting is with evidence-based research and helping the health system with quality improvement projects and coming up with guidelines and things like that. So all of that is really important. So there's a lot of research in the basic clinical reference questions, but it's just a lot more than what I think people would anticipate when they hear about what a medical librarian does. And then, technology on that side, again, is having the technology to deal with these more complex cases, especially as physicians are becoming more and more specialized. So it's really important. And
no conversation these days is complete without talking about AI, Alyssa. So in your personal opinion, and from whatever you've been talking to a lot of folks internally, externally, the community as such. What is your personal opinion on the role of AI? I mean, I know that, there are people who have a very balanced opinion, but there are people also on the extremes.
Yeah, so I'm very pro AI. And I think I'm probably on the side, everyone should run their paper through AI before submitting it. Let's improve the language and make it more inclusive and easy to read. And wouldn't it be great if we could just throw every science paper up and create a consumer version of that paper so that our research is more obtainable by everyone and open? But, long-term goals. I think in terms of AI, I think that we may see a shift from really big large language models to more curated large language models. So instead of having everything in the world, having, the still a ridiculous amount of information, but it focused on having it high curated evidence-based medicine that can be trusted. And then that would be what would be used, especially in medicine. But I think that, we need AI. It's going to make everyone's life easier. We can do a lot more research by having the technology being used to make some of the more not as high level parts of the process automated. I mean, definitely don't run your paper through and trust it. You have to read through it and make sure all the adjustments are perfect. But I think we should be really optimizing AI rather than steering away from it.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I agree with you. My personal opinion's the same as well, Alyssa. I think a lot of times all of us struggle with that starting point, and it just helps you to essentially get started. And there are so many other positive use cases that we could apply. Obviously, we have to balance that with, we can't go on the other extreme as well, like you correctly said, just use it and follow it without any checks. But yeah, I'm pro AI as well. But yeah, I thought I'll just quickly get your thoughts on that. Moving on, talking a little bit about inclusive research teams. So can you talk a little bit about the impact of inclusive research teams on the quality and innovation of research outcomes?
Yeah, so I think my favorite systematic reviews are those that include a patient. I think it is so important to get that perspective of a diverse population when you're developing your research team, because the goals of the patients aren't necessarily the same goals of the clinicians and the researchers on the projects. And those diverse perspectives can be anyone of varied backgrounds that can identify novel research questions and add to it, and methods rather than keeping it so tightly focused. I think that it improves inclusivity and drives creativity. So I know I ask the most random questions on my team. My background is I have a master's of library science and a master's of public health and a master's of business administration. So I have all these random thoughts every time I'm on a team, and they're like, oh, that was not where we were going, but this could be great to add, or it also helps with the peer review process. So if you have a very diverse research team, once you get to peer review, you've probably heard everyone's comments, and there's always something, but it's really good for making sure that you're really bringing the best product forward. I also think it just improves outcomes because you're thinking of more outcomes, and they're also more patient focused a lot of times when you have a patient on the team. And so that can be helpful. And it also makes the research more applicable to a broad audience. So it enhances both the quality and relevance of the eventual product put out.
Got it. I know we briefly spoke about it, but with the rise of digital tools, platforms, more automation coming in, more technology, how do you think the landscape will change in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, so I think my biggest hope is that email is mostly automated. I will say librarians get a lot of emails from a lot of different people, and it would be so helpful for AI to generate most of that. And I'm just going through and checking it and sending it out. I think that will really help with communication. But I could see that we have a greater reliance on AI tools, whether it's from doing email to generating the protocol information with all of that rich knowledge that's very important between projects. But it's frequently a lot of information that is the same around projects. So a lot of that information, it would really help if we had one standardized way, mostly standardized, I should say. We always want to be able to adjust as needed. Also, I'm hopeful that there'll be more growth in open access and data sharing. I mean, with the new NIH data sharing policy, we're very hopeful, obviously, that that's going to happen. And it will have to if people want to continue to be funded, which is nice. But I would love to see more open access and a shift in how things are being funded. So libraries are really strapped for financials. Like everything always increases and our budgets are not increasing at the same rate that everything else is. So it would just be really helpful if we really thought about the publishing process and, what is the best process for this and how to make it more sustainable and reduce costs while keeping the quality of the products the same. And I also think that we'll see more collaborative tools. So I'm very excited about the potential of AI and project management tools. So I'm hopeful and I'm hoping sooner than 5 years, but definitely in 5 years. A lot of people fear that libraries will go away as technology continues to grow. And they've been saying this since way before I was a librarian, probably before I was alive. But I do not fear anything like that. I think librarians are very dynamic and we consistently change and upskill with the technology. So I foresee that libraries and librarians will still be extremely helpful and impactful to both research, clinical work, and just the general public in 5 to 10 years.
Absolutely, yeah. And just again, if you have any quick thoughts on this, or we can even move on to the next question, Alyssa. But do you think preprints, will have a role to play? I know that talking to a lot of folks, there've been a very good intent in growing those, in building those. Obviously, some of them are quite well funded as well, but not necessarily in terms of the real impact have we seen where it should be. It's not to say that, things can't change, but just any quick thoughts on the role of preprints, and do you think, it might play an important role?
Yeah, so I think preprints will definitely also continue to grow. I think that is a great opportunity to get your research out there, obviously faster, but to make it more open. I think that in terms of preprints, we will potentially maybe see a slight shift in model. I mean, I know I would love to see where people publish on a preprint and then the journals go to preprints to kind of harvest the articles that they think are the best. And then those would go through peer review and edited processes. And then there would be a finalized version that you would see on the journal's website. So I could see that as a great way to make it more equitable in what papers are being selected. So it's not that you need the funding of the article processing charge, or you need the background information to be able to get pulled in from the high journals with these, it's often the bigger names that get those papers. So I think that if we publish the literature first and then pull from it, we may see a more robust population of people publishing, which would be really, really exciting.
Got it. If you could give one piece of advice to early career researchers about collaboration, what would that be?
Yeah. Start with clear expectations, right? And realistic timelines is the other thing. So communicating goals or responsibilities early on to avoid any misunderstandings later is so important. I would also recommend embracing interdisciplinary work. So collaborating with researchers, and I'm not just talking about librarians, like any researcher. I think it's really important that when you're doing a question that overlaps with public health, you're bringing in someone that has a public health background. You're bringing in someone with a business background when you're doing a cost-effective analysis. It's just really helpful to get all of those perspectives at the table when you're doing that type of research, and early on. Don't just invite them when you've packaged it up and you're ready to submit and you're like, oh, it's important that they are able to have impact on the methods and the data that you're collecting and all that good stuff. I also recommend seeking librarian support really early on. I know there's a cost problem with libraries. We're free. So there's a lot of demand, and there's one of me and a lot of researchers looking for help. So by emailing me really early on in the process, we're able to collaborate and we get on the schedule, and it's not like everything's a tight deadline. Nobody's stressed. Can also be really helpful. And then with that, librarians are always really busy. So if you have to email twice, please do. Don't just think, oh, they ignore me. That's it. Sometimes, that second email will just bring it to the top of my list, and I'll respond a little faster, because I know librarians everywhere are just super, super busy, which can be a struggle.
Absolutely. What are some best practices for industry professionals to engage effectively with librarians and leverage their expertise? I know you've spoken about a couple of points, Alyssa, but is there something else that comes to your mind?
Yeah, so I think same thing as early researchers, early involvement and open communication. I think leveraging our expertise is really important for like industry people to come. So I had an experience where I had this group of industry product developers come and watch me. And when they actually saw me use their product, they were like, wow, this is the least efficient thing I've ever seen. So they went and made a whole bunch of changes to their product to make it easier for the user, because how they were expecting we were using it was very different from how we were using it. Just like having that feedback loop where you're putting out a product and then you're actually going and checking to see how it's working and how the team is using it is also really important. So that way we can address pain points. Like also just like talking to us, because we always have a huge list of things that we want and that would be improved, or like things that we see that our researchers are asking for pretty frequently. And we're seeing a gap in the industry. So definitely open lines of communication is always really important.
And does it sometimes get challenging to just keep up with everything that's happening out there, Alyssa? I mean, I'm just thinking, so I recently finished my executive MBA from a school here in the UK. Whenever I would go to the database, there would be like a few more additions in terms of tools or other things that are being added, and which is great. But, how do you really sift through? How do you really know which one's better than the others? And I'm not just talking about from my perspective as a student, but even for a librarian. Does it get overwhelming at times? I mean, just so much happening out there.
Oh, it is so overwhelming. Full disclosure. I'm really excited about AI and its use in marketing tool. So I'm hoping that the medical evidence industry will create kind of like personas. So what I need as a librarian that supports residents, fellows, and faculty is very different than what a librarian that supports medical students needs. So I would love to see an AI where it's looking directly at the information, the marketing information that it's sending out, and then looking to see what specific things that would actually be helpful for me. So I don't need to know about the anatomy labs, but like you add something to the database, I want to know about that. So I think that would be super helpful. So it would reduce the amount of alert fatigue that we get. And I would also love to see like a monthly report or a annual report or a biannual report where we get an email that's like, okay, all of this information changed. This is the things that you're using most frequently. This is what will be impactful for you. We changed this field code to this field code, something like that. So that way I have all of that information in a few emails rather than getting one every single time there's an update. And then, I think about it, I move it over to my archive. I'm done with the email. And then, when I go to search the database in 3 days, I don't remember that email. That was 3 days ago. So I would really love to see that. And I think that would be really helpful, is more personalized marketing personas of who gets emails to what, about what updates.
Got it. What are the most important tools and resources that librarians use in supporting academic research? And from an industry perspective, how can they support or enhance these resources?
Yeah. So I would say that we're using a lot of like databases and discovery tools, and some of them are free and some of them are not, which brings up its own challenges. I think that we're also using a lot of, at least I am, a lot of reference management tools. And so that can be really challenging, especially for librarians, because we're providing citations to our researchers. And so, every single researcher is using a different reference management tool, and how, so instead of learning just one, I'm learning like 20 of these, not quite that many, and supporting all of those, especially if some of them are paywalled and I don't have access to them, but the researcher decided that it's so great that they would want to. And I'm, for anyone paying for resources that they would like, but it's really hard to support that. So I don't know if there would be like any kind of like discounted program that a librarian could get as part of this. We're supporting our researchers. That would be super helpful. I also think sometimes the window that we get for trials is very short, and it can be really hard to get researchers to try those in 30 days. So that can be challenging, especially when it's something that we would really like to purchase, but we just don't have the data to support it because we only have that 30-day window and then we're cut off. And it's like, okay, well, I would have liked to buy it, but, and sometimes, they don't pick the best times for those. Like our vendors will be like, oh, here it is. Perfect. It's available for you. You have 30 days. But it's like, okay, well, you picked summer between June and July. And that is when everybody's moving, starting one and before med school starts. So, I mean, not that it's a lull, but it's a little bit. So, and especially people leaving aren't going to learn new tools right before they go. So that can be really challenging, especially, and it's really great if we would get them like in July, because July we go and do all of our orientations and it would be easy to demo things like that and ask for feedback. So yeah, that's another challenge that we have, but reference management tools are really important to us. And then we're using a lot of at least I am, automation tools and systematic reviews. And those are really challenging because a lot of them are open access. So I had one tool that I put all of my eggs in that basket and then it stopped working. It wasn't their fault. There was a problem with the data set that's behind their tool, but it's still not working. And I'm a month out and now I'm starting to get a little panicked. I'm doing all this research on other tools that do the same thing and nothing fits it perfectly and makes my life as easy. So yeah, and I feel like there's always this constant change from one tool to the next. Yeah, I would just like to see long-term plans when something's introduced of how it's sustainable and how it's going to continue to be used. Because now I have this fear of putting all my research eggs in one basket and I develop all my workflows around something and then it's not as usable as it was.
That's a very valid point, and that's fantastic feedback to anyone listening, especially working with a lot of librarians. From a future perspective, I know you briefly spoke about it, but what do you see as the future of academic library services in the context of evolving research and publishing landscape?
I think that we're going to continue to support open science and the open science movement. And that will, I think, include more data sharing and curation information in addition to, publishing and everything else. I think that librarians are particularly useful in preservation too. So you may see more trainings and services out of libraries that deal with data preservation. I think that we're going to continue to support the research life cycle. And so we're going to continue to support the research life cycle from start to end and working with our researchers to ensure that they're following all of the guidelines and data management. And that is all the way through to post-publication. I think you'll also see that librarians will become more integrated with health systems and a deeper collaboration. In terms of quality improvement projects, I think that there is an onus on evidence-based practice, and there'll be a continued collaboration ensuring that this evidence-based practice is making it into the electronic health records and more integrated, hopefully in a way that will also reduce alert fatigue in electronic health records. And I think that there'll be more customization and personalization depending on the library that you work in. So you'll see more high-level research information, and we're already getting requests on how to use AI within the library and with our library resources. So I can see that as something that will continue to grow and develop. But I think our positions are going to get a bit more dynamic and maybe a bit more specialized. So you won't see as many general reference librarians. They'll be more embedded in departments or teams.
I agree. It's been such a great conversation with Alyssa Grimshaw today. We explored the vital role librarians play in fostering research collaborations, especially in clinical settings, and also spoke about how digital tools are shaping the future of academic libraries. A big thank you to Alyssa for sharing her perspective.
Thank you so much for having me.
In our next episode, we'll explore even more exciting trends in academic research and publishing. Stay tuned for what's next. And as always, thanks for listening to Insights Exchange. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries of knowledge.